real estate series. We're thrilled to have you on and hope that you will find that you'll get a lot of great information and value from today's event. I'd first like to thank and take a moment to introduce all of our presenters, our sponsors. Christy Smith with Landmark Title. Christy, would you share with us some things with regards to Landmark?
Hello, everyone. Again, I'm Christy Smith. First of all, I want to thank Allison and Scott for coming on. We're in some little bit of uncharted territory in our industry right now. And I think it's very important for all of us to realize that we need partners. And I want you to know that everybody on this program, Old Republic, Nations, Advantage, they're really great partners, but Landmark wants to be your partner. So we're just grateful to be here. And thank you again to Allison and Scott. We're very excited to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you, Christy. Next, we'll have Lisa with Advantage Home Inspections.
Lisa Vandenberg, Advantage Inspection Service, and just wanted to give you a couple tips. Of course, we do resale and new home and commercial inspections, but if you've got a listing, consider doing a listing inspection. You can do it right before you list, or if it's listing and sitting, then you can do an inspection then. It's just something that might set your home apart from other homes in the neighborhood or the subdivision. So just keep that in your back pocket. It's the same price as a regular home inspection. And again, just something that might set your listing apart. I'm going to put my information in the chat. Have a good webinar, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Kim with Old Republic Home Protection is our home warranty sponsor. Kim, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I am Kim with Old Republic Home Protection Home Warranty, and we are going on 50 years in service of providing budget protection to your clients. I just want to make sure y'all know we're not a one-trick pony. We have plans for just about every situation you could imagine. So not only single family homes under 5,000 and over 5,000, but we also offer new construction plans for, maybe a home years 2 through 5 that might be interesting to somebody. It's a great savings and provides a long-term protection for somebody in that situation. And of course, if you have any questions at all about Old Republic Home Warranty and why it's a good idea, feel free to reach out. I appreciate all of you. Thanks. Have a good webinar.
Thank you, Kim. I'd like to say a few words about Nations Lending. Nations Lending is just that. We are nationwide. I like to refer to us as a hybrid. We are a mortgage broker and mortgage banker. And what I mean by that is on our banking side, we do all of the agency, conventional loans, government loans, meaning FHA, VA, USDA loans, and we retain the servicing on those loans in-house. If we find we have to have a product that's from soup to nuts, land all the way up to 25 units, ITIN, we need something that's a bank statement. We have the ability to broker to over 20 different investors. So it gives us a nice, unique position in the market. Plus, what's an added benefit is all of our co-branded materials. So reach out to either myself or one of the other loan officers at Nations Lending to find out more about how we can support your business with either co-branded marketing materials for list kits, landing page to help you promote your business. We're here to help and support your business and be a longtime partner. The one sponsor that we want to go back to is Landmark Title and Sarah Touchstone. Sarah has been a huge supporter of a group called HELP, and I'd like her to introduce you and talk to you about what's happening in the fourth quarter for HELP. Sarah, will you share with us?
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Allison and Scott, for being on today as well, and for everyone that is attending. Wanted to take just a minute to highlight what we are doing with HELP. That's the Homeless Engagement Lift Partnership. This will be our 4th year participating in their Adopt a Family program. So every year, each of our offices adopts their own family, and we provide HELP actually provides a list of wants and needs for these families. So you don't have to fly in blind wondering what it is that these families need. It can cost, anywhere from a couple $100s to a few more if you adopt a larger family. Families are as small as 2 to 3 people, but can go up to 10 plus people. And we are really encouraging people to not only participate with our offices, but to adopt families of their own during the holiday season. These are families and children that are not expecting anything for the holidays. And when we are able to provide just a little bit of hope, a little bit of encouragement, and let them know that there are people out there that want them to succeed, it can really make all the difference in the world. So if you'd like any more information, please scan that QR code. You can help out with one of our other offices and their families, or like I said, would really encourage you to go above and beyond the holidays this year and adopt a family of your own. This is the last month to sign up. We will be getting our families the first week of November. So if you are interested in participating, please scan that QR code, get signed up, and help a family today.
Thank you, Sarah. It is a worthwhile group, and I encourage you to check out just help in general too. And if you haven't done your tax credit for 2023, they are approved Arizona tax credit group, so you can contribute money from what would be in your taxes to go right to this group. All right, let's kick off our program and get started. I'm excited to be able to introduce both of our presenters today and share a little bit about them with you. So our first person is Allison Grigg. Allison is the Senior Vice President for Business Development at the Arizona Commerce Authority, Arizona's leading economic development organization. She also serves as the President of the Greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone Board of Directors. Previously, she spent 5 years advocating for pro-business policies impacting manufacturers in her role as Executive Director of the Arizona Manufacturing Council at the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She worked alongside the Chamber's Legislative Affairs team to communicate and amplify the needs of Arizona's manufacturers to lawmakers at the state and federal level. She also was responsible for leading the Chamber's Transportation and Infrastructure Coalition, Accelerate Arizona. With more than 15 years experience working with companies expanding or relocating to Arizona, Allison brings a wealth of economic development experience to the state. Allison is a graduate of Middle Tennessee State University and currently resides in Scottsdale, Arizona. Thank you for joining us, Allison. We are excited to have you as part of our panel. Our second speaker, many of you probably know Scott Drucker as the Chief Executive Officer of the Arizona Association of Realtors. He oversees the strategic direction and operation of the largest trade association in Arizona. Along with the association's officers, Scott directs the formulation and implementation of the Arizona Realtors Vision, annual strategic plan, goals, and objectives. Scott also serves as the corporate secretary for the association and is an ex officio, sorry, I can't pronounce that this morning, member of the executive committee and board of directors, providing advisory assistance and legal guidance. He maintains oversight of the association's operating budget, monthly financial investments, reserve accounts, and political action committee accounts. After studying at the London School of Economics and obtaining a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Rochester, Scott received his Juris Doctor degree from George Washington University Law School. He became a founding partner at Mack, Drucker, and Watson PLC, a Phoenix-based law firm, and represented clients in every county in Arizona, both in state and federal courts, as well as the Arizona Department of Real Estate, Arizona Registrar of Contractors, and the Arizona Department of Financial Institutions. Scott has served on numerous Arizona real estate committees and is a frequent speaker on real estate issues. He also serves as a member of the Arizona Regional Multiple Listing Service Strategic Steering Committee. Thank you, Scott, for joining us. We're thrilled to have both you and Allison here today. I know that the feedback I've gotten in regards to today's webinar has been very positive. People are looking forward to this. So let's kick it off with Allison this morning. I'm going to ask Allison, Can you talk a little bit about the mission of the Arizona Commerce Authority for anybody who's not familiar, and why your group is so important to Arizona?
Sure. So first of all, I just want to thank you and Stacy and Scott and Christy and everybody else for joining the webinar this morning. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here. For those of you that are not familiar, the Arizona Commerce Authority is the state's economic development group. We manage and administer all of the state's financial incentive and programs. So all of those tax credits and grants and whatnot, all of that goes through our office. We have a board of directors, that's our setup, and the governor is the current chair of the board, Governor Hobbs. The governor is actually always the chair of the board, no matter who that governor is. And our current co-chair is Michael Bidwell. We work with companies that are looking to expand or relocate into Arizona. So we work with our partners at the city, at GPEC, at the county, site selectors, and et cetera, all the way from the initial due diligence to final site selection. Why we're important, I guess, is we were actually founded, our inception was in 2011 under Governor Jan Brewer. We did exist before that as the Department of Commerce, for those of you that can go back that far. But since the inception as the ACA, we have worked with nearly 1,200 companies, creating over 267,000 jobs in Arizona, and injecting over 113 billion in capital investment, which is huge. I also want to just touch on last year's performance real quick, because we did have an outstanding year. Our team worked with 92 companies just last year that committed to 24,000 jobs with an average wage of 71,000 and a projected CapEx of over 40 billion. Yes, TSMC is included in that number, but all three of those were records for us, and we could not have done that without the support of groups like this one.
Great. Thank you, Allison. So I'm going to pivot over to Scott. Boy, Scott, it seems like the year 2023 has been disruption and change in real estate. I mean, we've had so much happening this last year, and we're going to cover a broad set of topics. But what significant changes are you seeing that are impacting the real estate industry right now?
Sure. Well, first, again, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. I appreciate the invitation very much. Allison, it's nice to meet you, and very aware of all the work that your organization does for the benefit of our state. And even if, that maybe some folks on this Zoom session may not be familiar with your organization, they've certainly felt the beneficial effects of it, whether they your work, whether they recognize it or not. All right. So, Stacey, if I recall the question, I think you were asking significant changes, right, that we're seeing that's impacting the real estate market, right? Okay.
Correct.
So I wish I could give some really long, complicated answer that makes me sound super smart. But the reality is the biggest thing that we're seeing, and you guys know this, that's impacting us is rising interest rates. Buyers are deciding to stay put, and that significantly impacts our market, right? Figure that you've got maybe a potential buyer that has 2.75% interest rate, a 3% interest rate on their mortgage. From the standpoint of making a good business decision, some of them are saying, you know what? I'm going to stay in my home as opposed to buying a new home with a 7% interest rate. They just feel that doing that, even if they want to upsize, downsize, many of them are stating it doesn't make financial sense for me to do it at this point in time with the high interest rates. And so there's consequences to that, right? I mean, the primary consequence is less inventory. Buyers staying put also softens demand. And we know that with less demand, the consequence of that is we've seen the Valley's median home price fall by, I think it's roughly $5,000 to around $430,000. So the rising interest rates are probably the factor that, in my opinion, is having the most significant impact on the market at this point in time. And one other thing that we're seeing, which is really unfortunate, that is impacting the market right now, is evictions. Maricopa County last month saw a near record number of evictions. We had close to I think it was 8,000 evictions last year, and that's the most we've had since August of 2005. And everybody remembers what the economy was like in the mid to late 2000s. So why are we having that number of evictions now? Well, of course, it goes back to the rising cost of rent. Often when we've got low inventory, which is a result of the homeowner staying put, low inventory leads to high rent. And as rent increases, it really puts a strain on some renters, and the unfortunate consequence of that is eviction. So from my standpoint, the most significant changes that we're seeing that are impacting the real estate market, number one would be rising interest rates, and number two would be increased rents that are leading to evictions.
Yeah, and I would throw in there too, just the affordability, right, of homes, right? We've seen, significant appreciation for the most part in the last 4 years. So you've had a combination of higher prices on homes and the interest rates, and it's different than what we've seen in other downturns. So I think you've nailed it. Yeah, you've nailed it.
Yeah,
so
I think that's right.
Yeah. Allison, kind of along the same lines, you have a very global view of what's happening in Arizona, and in Maricopa County specifically, with all of the new businesses that are coming. What are you hearing from the companies? Your feedback in regards to the real estate industry?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And it was good to hear your answer, Scott, so that I have some insight on, really the audience of the call. As you mentioned, Stacy, we are really working on that commercial side with a lot of industrial users and office and the like, which definitely impacts residential, of course. So we're really in the middle of a manufacturing boom here in the state, and we have been for several years, for many years, really. We're seeing, of course, these large scale employers like the Intels, like TSMCs, that are coming into the market, specifically Maricopa, and really having a huge impact on that area because their suppliers are now beginning to move here. And we've been talking about that for several years now, but it's actually coming to fruition now. We're seeing the same in Tucson, quite frankly. We've got some pretty big companies moving down there, like American Battery Factory. They're going to be creating 1,000 jobs in Tucson, investing $1 billion in CapEx. We've also got, significant drivers like Raytheon or RTX, not to forget about our existing companies. Raytheon, for example, they just got a very large, over $1 billion contract with the Air Force to continue to build the AMRAAM missiles. And just using them as an example, they are the largest A&D company in the entire world with 180,000 employees. So when a company like that secures a significant contract, when a TSMC locates, it's definitely felt by the local economies. Something else that we're seeing having a huge impact is the IRA. And I know that can mean a lot of different things. So I'll clarify, it's the Inflation Reduction Act. As all of you know, this was passed by the Biden administration last August. And it's going to direct $400 billion in federal funding to clean energy projects with the goal of lowering the carbon emissions by the end of the decade. And that's delivered through tax credits and grants in various formats. But the point is that IRA is leading to really significant announcements here in Arizona. According to the DOE, as of September, we've seen 11 clean tech projects. This is post IRA, right? 10 in the battery sector and 1 in solar. Those combined projects represent over $7 billion in CapEx and 2,000 jobs. So really just seeing a lot of impact from that. I know it doesn't necessarily help every single industry. Pharma is a good example, but we are seeing significant growth in clean tech due to that.
Great. Nice. Scott, in the chat, there's a couple of questions, and somebody was asking for clarification on the evictions.
Sure. Is there something more specific that they're looking for? I mean,
just basically, was that 8,000 evictions last month or last year, or is that
8,000 last month.
last month?
8,000 last month, which again is the most that we've seen since August of 2005. So we almost set a record, but we fell just short of that. But it certainly does not signify good things to come for renters. And it's one of the reasons why, for those of you who followed the legislative session last year, one of our largest accomplishments was we passed legislation to eliminate transaction privilege tax. So, which is essentially a tax that gets passed on entirely to renters. Property owners are responsible for remitting that tax, but it's passed along to the tenants. And so, in an effort to make housing more affordable to tenants, we passed legislation. And it was not easy to eliminate that tax, and that'll go into effect in 2020.
So let's keep with that same vein, because
Okay.
I know how involved you are at a legislative level with AAR and Armless. Talk a little bit more about what are you seeing from a legislative standpoint that is impacting the industry that the agents should be aware of?
Yeah, perfect. So we are the largest political action committee in the state of Arizona. So I'd like to believe that we have a lot of clout, especially when it comes to real estate issues. I will give the caveat that I'm not our government affairs director. I'm not our lobbyist. So it's not the world I live in on a day-to-day basis, but certainly consult frequently about it. So I don't have a crystal ball here, but we've heard rumors about some legislation that we think is going to come down the pipe. And I'll start with legislation that we may be bringing forward, which is legislation to clarify some confusion around a statute that many of you may not be familiar with. It's ARS 2015-85. That has been misinterpreted by some as banning real estate joint ventures in Arizona. That's not what the statute states, but we've had people that have interpreted it in that manner, and attorneys potentially seeking to enforce it in that manner. And what this statute does is it discusses who title insurance companies can directly pay and who they can indirectly pay. And there's an argument, albeit I'm very confident it's incorrect, that when they're paying money to a title company that's partially owned by a real estate agent, that's indirect compensation, which is, they allege, improper under 2015-85. So what we would like to do is clarify 2015-85 to make it to prevent any arguments forthcoming to suggest that RESPA compliant joint ventures are in fact illegal in Arizona. We're also inevitably going to see legislation surrounding short-term rentals. They come up every year. You guys probably read about it in the papers, and we're going to see it again. We do support regulations that help ensure that short-term rentals don't become a nuisance, right? We don't want them disturbing neighborhoods. We don't want them becoming, the party house that bothers everybody. So legislation that puts reasonable regulations in place, we support. What we don't support are laws that prohibit or cap short-term rentals outside of HOAs, right? And this comes down to protecting private property rights. If you move into an HOA and you contractually agree that you're not going to use the property as a short-term rental, that's one thing. But we have a law in Arizona that prohibits cities and towns from prohibiting short-term rentals or banning short-term rentals. And so we're hearing of legislation where they want to cap short-term rentals or even prohibit them. That's not something that we're going to support, because again, if I own a home, I want to be able to do with it what I want. And if my intended use outside of an HOA is to use it as a short-term rental, we believe that from the standpoint of protecting private property rights, the homeowner should have the right to do that. We may see legislation to address deed fraud. Everybody on this call, I don't need to go into deed fraud. Everybody on this call is well aware of what we're seeing in the market in regard to deed fraud. And as a result, legislators are looking to introduce legislation. We don't have an objection to that, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that any legislation that's introduced doesn't put realtors at risk. We've seen some of the proposals early on, and they are proposals that we're not in a position to back. In fact, we would lobby against them. Some of the proposals, there was one where the real estate licensee would have to obtain the driver's license from the seller and ensure its validity. we're not experts in identifying, fake IDs. That's not our area of expertise, and that's not something that real estate professionals should be charged with. There was another proposal about real estate professionals collecting, obtaining personally identifiable information from the seller to ensure that the seller is who they say they are. That's really problematic because there's laws surrounding how you collect personally identifiable information, how it has to be stored, how and when it has to be destroyed. That's not the role of real estate professionals. And so we don't want legislation in regards to deed fraud that puts an unfair onus on the realtor to do things that are outside their area of expertise. We're probably going to see some legislation to help fund the Arizona Department of Real Estate. I'm sure everybody is familiar with our new commissioner, Susan Nicholson, who's been doing a fantastic job, and we've been working very closely with her. They are looking for some money to purchase or to retain, I guess, a business analyst consultant as a precursor to overhauling their computer system. We are committed to working with the Arizona Department of Real Estate to come up with that money and help them. But we need to be careful about the source of that money, right? We don't want that source to be increased licensing fees or something that negatively impacts real estate licensees. So we're committed to working with them, but we just need to be careful as to where the source of that is coming from, because we don't want it coming from our members. There's going to be legislation to address water. Again, a topic I don't need to get into detail on. Everybody is familiar with water issues that we're seeing in our state, and maybe Allison has insight into this also. I don't know. We don't know exactly what's going to be coming down the pike in regard to water. We know that there's going to be some proposals from the governor's Water Policy Council, but we don't know what those are going to be. The one thing we're definitely hearing is legislation to address the exemption, the 100-year assured water supply requirements to build for rent. Right now, that's an exemption in the market, build to rent. And so we think that, I don't know if I would call it a loophole, but we think that there may be legislation to come to that would impact that. So that's probably what we most likely to see. And if I apologize, they're doing some construction directly in the office directly behind me. So if you hear banging or sawing, that's where that's coming from. But yeah, Stacey, I think that's really some of the primary pieces of legislation that are going to impact our industry that we're anticipating.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Allison, kind of along the same lines for you, from that business perspective, can you share with us from the AZ Commerce Authority, what are you seeing as legislatively that would be impacting the state?
Yeah, so, I'm not our legislative affairs director either. That's Brett Galley, and Scott, I know he works with Matt very closely and on your side. But along the water question, I just want to reiterate, we do expect there will likely be legislation along those lines. But I just want to also say that, every time I get this question, it's always interesting because of how the media has been reporting it. So I always like to have this opportunity for those of us that are closer to the issue. We know that some of that reporting is, exaggerated at best, or just flat out false and inaccurate. So we have really made it our mission at the Commerce Authority to correct some of that narrative that's been going out there, working with our partners to do so across, whether it's partners in Buckeye who have been affected, or Pinal or Greater Phoenix or wherever. We're really trying to shape the story. So some of the talkers, I don't want to, tell you guys things that you already know, but I want to also make sure that we have the facts. We are using less water here in the state than we ever have, than we did in 1957. And so that is with, 7 times the population and over 20 times the economy. And I've been saying that stat for years, and 1957 never changes, but the 7 million and then the 20 times the economy always does. So we continue to be really very, very good at managing our water. And we have been doing that for many, many years. We've been conserving water. We've been coming up with new technology to conserve and to reuse and recycle our water. And so, Scott, you mentioned the 100-year water supply. There's definitely some nuances around that, but we, in general, and especially nationally, that is viewed as a positive, a very positive selling point, if you will, because we are the only state in the nation that offers that 100-year water supply. And I know that we're going to see some changes to that, and we've already seen some hiccups to that in specific cities in the valley. But overall, that's really a positive. And as you guys know, we've got so many sources of our water here. We've got the snowpack, we've got our renewable sources, the Salt River, the Verde, the Colorado. So we do have multiple sources of water here in Arizona. And we're in a really good position because there's always press around the Colorado River. What are the allocations? We obviously had to go through all of that and figure that out with 7 states and Mexico a couple of years ago. But one of the points I really like to share is in Arizona, only 30-ish% of our water comes from the Colorado. So we're only 30% reliant on that source. If you look to our neighbors in the West, Nevada is 97% reliant on that source. California is 60% reliant. So you can see that we've got a really good, diverse water portfolio. If you look at the city of Phoenix, the largest city, of course, in Arizona, only 2% of their water, which is really low, comes from groundwater, which is that finite source. Yes, it can be recharged, and we do that, but that is considered the finite source. Along those lines, we have 3 trillion gallons saved underground in our aquifers, just in groundwater. And if you only used that source alone, which we would never do, but if you did, we could serve the city of Phoenix for more than 30 years with that source alone. You know, and also just along the legislative lines, I think it was last year, or it could have even been the year before. Anyways, Matt and Brett would know this, but the previous governor dedicated $1.2 billion towards water conservation technology. So that should, you know, come to fruition in the next decade or so in the form of desal and other really high-tech water conservation tools. There's also been $30 million that was allocated towards farmers and helping them be more efficient with their irrigation and those other tools. And that's another point of why we've been able to keep our water usage lower, is because we are converting that ag land into different uses, right? Where it makes sense. I mean, of course, agriculture is a very important part of Arizona. It's at least one of the 5 C's. So, or 7 C's now, depending on who you're talking to. Yeah, so that has really helped us to save our water, converting that to multiple different sources. So I just want to reiterate that the water is there. We are not in crisis mode. I did air quotes for anybody that's not watching. So it's really not what it's being reported to be.
Yeah, we're very fortunate in Arizona. The people that came before us were very thoughtful in knowing that this would be a place, a destination, location. And we see that in our tourism and just in people wanting to live and have our beautiful weather. And our forefathers and mothers did a great job of setting up our water supply so that we are not just relying on one resource. So thank you, Allison. That was a great overview. I appreciate that. One of the things that had come up in the chat box, Scott, and you and I had kind of went back and forth in regards to email, and I know that there's still a lot undecided, but there's a lot of things that are out there that are not clear in regards to what's happening with buyer commission. So I'm gonna, the gal or whoever put Deanna put in the chat box, what do you see coming from the lawsuits in NAR? I'm seeing a lot of states and MLS companies making changes regarding buyer broker agreements and commissions offers to buyers agents. What should we be prepared for?
This is a complex topic that I could talk about for hours. Fortunately for you guys, I won't. But yeah, let me talk a little bit about how these class action antitrust lawsuits have the potential to impact multiple listing services and then the nature of buyer representations. I think that's really what the question is getting at, and Stacey, a little bit of what we talked about previously. So we have this lawsuit, right, where the plaintiffs are sellers, and the sellers are essentially stating that we've got these defendants, right, and all of these defendants got together and conspired to either create, enforce, or abide by MLS rules. And they're saying that these MLS policies, these rules, have financially harmed sellers. The sellers are saying it's an unfair system that we have to compensate the buyer's agent, right? Because we know that when you put a property in the multiple listing service, you're required to offer compensation to the buyer's side. And the sellers are saying that's not fair. That financially harms us. The seller's agent, or excuse me, the buyer's agent doesn't represent us. You know, the buyer's agent doesn't look out for our interests. In fact, it's the buyer's agent that's arguing against us. So, and those are tough arguments, right? And so what they want is maybe a system whereby buyers pay their agents, sellers pay their agents. And so NAR has a lot of really good defenses to this, but one of them is that there's a reason why we have this system. And the reason is this system helps buyers buy homes. And what do sellers want to do? Sellers want to sell their homes. So they in turn benefit from a system that allows or enables buyers to buy. We know that buying a home is very expensive, right? It's hard to come up with the money to put down. It's really hard to come up with the money if you're trying to put 20% down. And so for them to change this system to the point where a buyer would have to pay their agent, meaning that at close of escrow, a buyer's going to have to put down the money to purchase the home and then also pay $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 in cash to their own agent, they're probably not going to be able to afford to do that because that money cannot be wrapped into the loan. So they don't have the money to do that. And so we have a system, that enables them to purchase the home. And again, that benefits the sellers who are the plaintiffs in these lawsuits. And what do the sellers say? Well, the sellers in response really say two things. First thing they say is, hey, it's not my job to make sure the buyer can afford to purchase my home. If they can't afford my home, they should go and buy something less expensive. The other thing they say, and this is really where it gets problematic, is they take the position that there's no law that requires you as a buyer to have representation. You don't need an agent. You're choosing to have an agent represent you. And if you can't afford an agent, then don't utilize one. And so our concern is that they're going to potentially create a system where, again, the sellers pay their agent, the buyers pay their agents, but the buyers aren't going to be able to come up with that money to pay their agents in cash at close of escrow. And so how is that going to change the nature of buyer representation? The plaintiffs are looking for injunctions to change the way our multiple listing service model works, right? We know that if you have a property you are publicly marketing for sale, it has to be placed in the multiple listing service within 1 business day. And so they'd like that to change so that there is no requirement that the property be placed in the multiple listing service. Then, of course, they also want to change the requirement to say, once you put the property in, you should not have to offer compensation to the buyer side. There should be no mandate. So if successful, and the lawsuits have a ton of different outcomes that could happen, there's a large spectrum of outcomes, but the concern is that there could be an injunction that changes the way our multiple listing services work, and that they could try to change us to a model where buyers are financially responsible for their own representation, which they may not be able to afford because those commissions cannot be wrapped into the loan. So I think that's maybe a long answer to a complicated question, but I could, Stacey, if they've got additional questions or points they want me to touch on in that regard, I'm happy to. I don't know.
So it sounded like it's is it currently in like an appeals where we're basically there's so a decision?
So-
I've heard October 15th date that there are
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah, so October 16th is the date that the first trial is taking place. That's in the Stitzer case. It's Stitzer. That case is taking place in the Western District of Missouri. So the plaintiffs, the class of plaintiffs in that case are sellers who sold a property in Missouri. So using one of those 4 multiple listing services in Missouri, where a commission was paid from the buying side, from the listing side to the buying side. So that is scheduled for a 3-week jury trial in the Stitzer case starting on October 16th. I'm glad that it is a 3-week jury trial because there are a lot of nuanced arguments that the National Association of Realtors and the other defendants need to make, and that takes some time to explain to non-real estate professionals. Once that verdict comes down, it will go into appeals for years. So unless there's an injunction that gets put in place immediately, and that's probably not going to happen, this is going to stretch out for a long time. And this is only trial 1 of 2 because there's a second case, which is the Merle case, which is taking place in the Northern District of Illinois. So cases haven't started yet, but I mean, we've got just a couple of weeks before the Stitzer one is going to go to trial.
So technically right now, there's no changes to business. It's business as usual right now.
It is, but NAR has had some requests, right? Some things that they've asked agents to do. And the first one is they are encouraging the use of buyer broker representation agreements, right? Because the buyer broker representation agreements, they're very beneficial from the standpoint that they articulate and document the services that are going to be provided, and they also clarify compensation. But one of the benefits of that is the plaintiffs argue, well, the compensation, what do you mean? It always comes from the listing side to the buying side, but the use of a buyer broker representation agreement suggests otherwise. So NAR is encouraging the use of buyer broker employment agreements. They are mandatory, legally required in over a dozen states. They're not legally required here, but is it possible that in the future that could happen? Yeah, I think that is a possibility. The other thing that NAR is urging is if you are the listing agent, have a conversation with your seller and make sure they understand that commissions are negotiable, right? Not only do they get to really negotiate the commission with their own agent, but they get to decide how much they want to offer the buyer side. And so that conversation is very important. And I think that maybe we're not doing as good a job in having that conversation with our clients as we could. And so the plaintiffs are gonna put, sellers on the stand, and these sellers are going to testify to the fact that my agent never had this conversation with me. Yeah, you're telling me that commissions are negotiable, but I didn't know that. That discussion never took place. So those are 2 things that they're urging. And then the third is they want to direct agents and then have agents direct their clients to a resource it's called competition.realtor. So a website, competition.realtor is what they would like for you guys to take a look at, read, understand, and then convey some of that information to your clients.
That's great. Yeah, I'm going to check that out.
And again, I apologize for the noise behind me. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We adjusted the volume on our end so we can now hear you better. So
okay.
Somebody put that in the chat. Kind of piggybacking on that, would you recommend then to an agent and or brokers to require the buyer broker agreements be mandatory?
So that's a decision that each broker has to make. But NAR is certainly encouraging that. Buyer brokers have to decide that for themselves as to whether that fits their business model, whether they think that that's in their best interests, knowing how our buyer broker exclusive employment.
It seems like a best practice, right? And it's definitely over the 30 years that I've been in the industry and since that form's been introduced, it's now getting easier to have that conversation with your clients. So it's just a matter of getting it into your business practice. I think it's smart. Allison,
hold on, and I'm so sorry. One of the possible benefits of requiring it statewide is I've heard agents say, well, I'm not going to use it because if I insist on it, they may go to another agent that isn't using it and doesn't insist on it. So if there's a law that makes it mandatory across the state, in theory, maybe that levels the playing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Allison, I want to pivot back to getting some more information in regards to what is the forecast? What are you seeing are those big things that are happening in Arizona, maybe specifically for Maricopa County, but where you think the growth will be kind of on the long term?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And, we're in Arizona and the growth is really everywhere. We've been very, very fortunate in that respect. Obviously, as I talked about earlier, we really anticipate Maricopa to continue to grow. Pinal, Tucson, of course, one of these days it will be, in the future, everybody's predicting it may just be one big giant metropolis. But, in terms of what we see, and, you guys a lot of you are on the residential side, but this definitely impacts it all, right? It all works together. But, in Maricopa County, for example, right now, where we're seeing the most growth, I talked about, how we've had really a record year of job growth last year. Right now in our pipeline, right, we all work with projects. We have 8 members of our team that work on the business development side. We've just hired a couple other new VPs. So we're expanding our team to handle all these new projects. But in Maricopa specifically, we have about 275 active projects that are looking to locate there and create new jobs and new capital investment. In fact, of those projects, they have the potential to generate over 77,000 new jobs in the area. We're seeing, so many people. We've got 258 people a day moving here last year. So, a huge workforce. We're just seeing tremendous growth. You asked me to touch on Pinal too, I think in your notes. And in Pinal, we have 55 active prospects right now, with the potential to generate 46,000 jobs, which is huge, right? That's huge for Pinal. As a state organization, as ACA, we have never had 400 prospects in the pipeline, and now we do. So this is our first year to ever have that many in our pipeline. I will note that the numbers I'm giving you on Maricopa and Pinal, some of these companies do come to us and say, hey, we'd like to locate in Phoenix, Coolidge, or Tucson. So, some of the numbers are a little bit fluid, but the 400 in our pipeline is just amazing. When people talk about, a slowdown, we're certainly not seeing it at the ACA. And it sounds like you guys are not seeing it either. I know that I personally have rented a home in Scottsdale for the past 3 years, been looking to buy, and it seems like those options are getting less and less available, to buyers like me. I live in the Kierland area on 68th and Bell, and it's such a wonderful area. But with all this tremendous growth and the new industries and everything that's coming in here, we're really seeing that expansion out, either out of necessity, people having to move out of these urban areas, go a little bit farther, or they're just, they enjoy that kind of living a little bit farther out. We're seeing lots of investment. Hopefully, there's planned investment in new housing in Pinal, which is really desperately needed. And across the state, we represent the whole state. So our team had the chance to go to Kingman, Bullhead City, and Kingman, Bullhead City, and Lake Havasu in Mojave County last week, which we don't often do because we have a dedicated rural team, but our business development team went out there. And you would just be shocked, at the growth, even on those peripheral markets. Bullhead City, I admit I had never been to, but it was a legit city, and it had, all of these amenities that you would just not think. So the whole state is growing. We're seeing a lot of it here in Maricopa County. Yes, labor challenges exist, right? But we're not alone. They exist nationwide. It's not an Arizona problem. In fact, we think that we're in a better position, we know we are, than other states to tackle those labor issues. the construction issues, for example. I'll just touch on real quick. We have some workforce accelerators that we've been creating throughout the state. Some of you may be familiar with our first one in Pinal County called Drive 48. And that is it's a 15,000 square foot bricks and mortar facility. And there's robotics and mechanics and other things in there. And that was created really to train Lucid employees. It was an investment between the state, the county, the city, and the local community college to create that facility. And since the creation of that facility, more than 2,000 Lucid employees have been trained through that. And obviously, they're going to be looking at other employers to use the facility. The intent there is for the employers to work with us and work with academia to say, here's the jobs that we need to hire. And then us and the educators say, okay, we're going to take that information, we're going to develop curriculum to match, and then we're going to train the workers that you need, so that we can sort of combat, the hiring crisis, if you will, that some of these companies are facing because they're needing to hire so many employees. And that's a model that we're following. So the Drive 48 facility, we've already announced 2 other facilities along the same lines. We're calling them Future 48. And one was announced in Kingman and one was announced in Yuma. Again, bricks and mortar facilities, training employees. And there's also going to be 6 more of those facilities, workforce accelerators announced. We're definitely going to have one for the semiconductor space because we've seen so much growth there. But these are going to be across the state. And that was made possible in part by a $30 million dedication that the previous administration put into the budget. Obviously, that's not enough money to create these. It is a partnership with other entities, the community colleges, the cities, et cetera. But, we think we're well on our way to helping really combat these hiring needs that we're seeing with those facilities.
Allison, and I don't mean to catch you off guard with this question, but just to kind of piggyback on that, obviously it opens up a lot of opportunities for us on the real estate side and on the residential piece. But it's also, I can see it creating a lot of challenges just because of our lack of inventory. Builders are not building like they were in the early 2000s. Is that being addressed with the governor or the Department of Housing? Are they, I would assume they're leaning into that. Do you know anything or can you share anything in regards to what the state is doing to address those concerns?
I do know that affordable housing is one of the governor's top priorities. Since she took office, she has been talking a lot about that issue, and it is a state issue, and we need to make it a state issue. However, it has to also be addressed really at the local level. I know Mayor Gallego and others have been really focused on that issue, but right now we have to lean into our cities for support there. But obviously, as we see these employers moving in, we know that is an issue on the horizon. Same as we know that getting the construction workers that we need is an issue on the horizon. That's why we're developing programs at the community colleges to help train construction workers too. We used to be, and we still are, but we used to really tout the fact that we have more manufacturing workers than construction workers. And that was back, 10 years ago, right, when the economy, or I guess 5 years ago, when we were shifting from tourism and these other types of jobs to more jobs that have greater impact, like manufacturing and whatnot. But now we have to find more construction workers to build the TSMCs and to build these mega plants. But it's something that we're definitely focused on.
Excellent. That's great. Kind of piggyback off of that with you, Scott. I mean, I know AAR is involved in, so many different areas and kind of, again, to ask you the same question, AAR's involvement in helping move that ball towards more affordable and just housing inventory in general?
Yeah, so we did participate. The governor put together a work group that traveled around the state to meet with local officials to talk about steps that can be taken. And so we were a large part of that. We're also huge supporters of the Arizona Housing Fund. And I know a lot of you are familiar with that, and you might ask your clients to donate $25 at close of escrow to go towards the Arizona Housing Fund. It's a nonprofit fundraising platform that is committed to helping construct permanent, supportive, low-income housing. And so we work closely with them. Not only do we donate money to them, but we help them raise a lot of money. They've raised over $1 million. They've supported in the construction of projects all across the state. In fact, right across the street from us right now, they're building a 42-unit complex, all single studio apartments for homeless housing transition. So that very active with the Arizona Housing Fund. And in AAR, we also have the Arizona Realtors Foundation for Housing and Community Outreach, which we utilize for grants for housing. And one of the new things with that is, some of you may know, we have a new Arizona Realtors license plate, and money from every license plate sold goes to the Foundation for Housing and Community Outreach, which then goes back into grants directly to the community. And of course, the National Association of Realtors is working on all sorts of federal legislation. I pulled a list of them just to give you guys an idea of some of them. I mean, the Housing Supply and Affordability Act, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, Greater Shopping Centers Act. Right? They want to take shopping centers, abandoned shopping centers, and revitalize them to create housing. The Revitalizing Downtown Act. So, I mean, there's a lot of things going on at the national level as well. So there's no easy answers to lack of affordable housing. If there were, it would have been addressed already. But I'd like to hear that everybody's doing their part and people are trying. You know, everybody's aware of the problem, and so steps are being taken, but they're not easy. And Allison, I was really glad to hear that you're looking to purchase a home. There may be about 60 people on this call that could be very helpful to you.
I was just thinking, I definitely said that in front of about 70 realtors. So
hopefully you'll be getting about 70 emails later with contact information. So
well, I want to take this opportunity to wrap it up. Is there any last parting thoughts that either of you have that we didn't cover today that you'd like to, that I may have overlooked? I think we've covered everything that's been in the chat so far. But if there's anything, and even my co-host, that Sarah, is there anything that we missed that I did not address?
I'd like to just mention real quickly too, a resource for you guys as realtors. I used to go on our website all the time when I was working more in the advocacy space. In fact, more than I even do now. But I just want to encourage you guys to visit our website at azcommerce.com, because yes, we have the programs and tools and incentives, but there's also really a lot of research, you know, community profiles, things that you can share with your clients about the area. We've got news and events if you're looking to get involved, you know, different task forces, and then different announcements on the companies that are moving here. So just some really good information that you may want to pass along to some of your buyers, or I guess if you're representing a seller. And then our newsletters as well. I'd encourage you to sign up if you're interested.
Thank you. No, that's great information, because you're right. There's a lot of great resources on the website. Scott, anything else that we need to be aware of that is happening at AAR?
You know, I mean, we've got a lot of new things planned for next year. We're going to be launching an app. We're going to be starting a podcast. We're going to be filming a lot of new contract conversations videos, which are really two brokers that go through our, take about 10 minutes and sit and go through our forms of detail, because some of the ones that we've filmed previously are outdated as we continue to change our forms. I think it was Chris on the chat was asking about Arizona Housing Fund. If you'd like additional information on that, what it is, how we help raise money for that, and where the money goes to, you can find that on our website, which is aaronline.com. aaronline.com. If you type in Arizona Housing Fund, you'll see pages that come up that discuss that. And then also, I would just urge everybody, take 10 minutes every week and get our weekly newsletter voice. It'll be some of the best time you spend each week just to keep up to date with what's changing in the industry, what's changing here at AAR that really impacts you.
Yeah, critical right now to stay well informed and stay on top of everything that's happening and changing in real estate. To piggyback off of Allison, reach out to either Landmark or myself. We've also offered employee benefits package to help people that are relocating to Arizona with assistance for closing costs. So contact your Nations Lending loan officer or your rep at Landmark Title to get further information. And we're happy to help support our realtor partners. Well, I guess that finishes it up for the day. We're at the top of the hour. Again, thank you, Allison, Griggs, and Scott Drucker. We very much appreciate this. Was an incredibly informative hour. I took a lot of notes, so appreciate your time and knowledge, and thank you for all you're doing for our state and our community. It does not go unnoticed, so we really appreciate everything. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll have our next session in December, on December 7th. More information will be coming out about that and guest speakers for our next event. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.